Well, Shabbat Shalom, happy Sabbath, and welcome to the Sabbath service for this 28th day of May 2022 on the pagan Roman calendar. It is the 27th day of the second month on God's holy sacred calendar, and I was a little delayed coming on screen with you because I was up late last night indexing our Bible study, which if you didn't see, I hope you will tune in and see last night's Bible study. Mr. Armstrong spoke on truth, the greatest quest, and he'll be speaking on truth again this morning and explaining how truth is revealed. That's a subject some of you were recently asking me about, and something, we should definitely be very, very concerned about. Now, I'm over here where I have a keyboard for a computer where I can go put the share location of today's live stream onto the weekly bulletin page, which, as I explained last night, as I was late, didn't get it in within the music opening last night. I didn't get it in again this morning. And all of my sister says, don't tell all your problems. Well, sometimes when you have to fix the problem while you're live, some of your ad-libbing can just be, I'm fixing this. For those of you who look for the live stream notice on Facebook, on the weekly bulletin page. And I got the slide off of the numbers off the refrigerator, so when we talk about this being the end of the 6th week of our 7-week count at sunset tonight, I can give you a little picturesque view of that so you can see it a little better. As it would happen when you're trying to do things live, it can sometimes be a little more difficult. By the way, the opening music slowed me down because I had the live stream page for COG, our homepage, open, and it usually requires you to press the speaker button for the audio to come on. And the live stream is always 5-10 seconds delayed. And so we were picking up an echo, and I had to go in there and turn that speaker off. Okay, what am I doing? We are going to take the share. You can do this too, by the way, if you want to share this with some of your friends. I'm going to copy the link under the share. It's not exactly a button. I guess it is kind of a button. It has a little arrow next to it. And I'm going to go over and paste that onto the weekly bulletin page, along with a header that just says this is the live stream for today. Okay, now I've got that copied, and I just go over here back to weekly bulletin page, hit the create post button and paste this link, hit the post button. All right, and for those who are looking on weekly bulletin for that notice, I think I can see it is there. All right, we're going to open up this morning because some of you may be still kind of waking up as I am. We're going to open up with a hymn that allows you to participate in the service, or gives you an opportunity to participate in the service, and at the same time, we all wake up a little bit better together. If you're watching this live, and we do it early from the United States so that it's still the Sabbath over in the United Kingdom at this time. Let's start off this morning with this hymn that we sing often, a good one for us to really, Mr. Armstrong used to talk about the two trees, and some brethren, he'd talk about it often, week after week, and some brethren came to him and politely, kind of nicely, asked Mr. Armstrong, well, Mr. Armstrong, when are you going to go to a different subject? You're always talking about these two trees. And so he waited and gave the answer that sometimes I do with some of you, because I get so many things on Facebook, I just cannot answer them all, and email too. In a service, he answered and said, he gave the example of an old Protestant preacher who was giving the same sermon over and over again, week after week, who told his brethren, he said, brethren, Mr. Armstrong liked to quote others when he could. He said, that old Protestant preacher told his brother, he said, "Brethren, we'll go on to a new subject in our sermons when you start doing what I'm preaching to you about in this sermon." So Mr. Armstrong said, same thing here with the two trees. Once you get it about the two trees, then we'll go on to another subject. And finally, he did start going on to another subject. All right, let's sing this too. But then he also reminded us, even after that, brethren, half of you aren't getting it. 90% of you aren't getting it. So we want to get it. We want to get this message that if you obey God, like God says in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, the two blessing and cursing chapters, if you obey, you get blessings, and the nation gets blessings when the majority of the people in the nation are obeying God. And when we disobey, we get just the opposite of blessings. But this emphasizes the positive part of that. Blessed and happy is the man who, even if he had before, just stop it and start never walking astray again. Let's all sing this together, if you will, with us from Psalm 1. Everybody on verse 1. Blessed and happy is the man who does never wrong mistake, nor with ungodly men stands in sinners' way. All he does prospers well, but the wicked are not so. They are gently for the wind, driven to and fro. Verse 2, everybody. Where its corners cherry says, for he places his delight in God's law and meditates on it day and night. All he does prospers well, but the wicked are not so. They are gently for the wind, driven to and fro. Everybody, verse 3. We shall be a tree that grows, planted by the riverside, which its season yields its fruit, green its leaves abide. All he does prospers well, but the wicked are not so. They are gently for the wind, driven to and fro. Our brethren, thank you to all of you who sang along on that. On this 27th day of the second month on God's holy sacred calendar, we're going to take a look at the calendar for a moment and meet in due season. We're going to see exactly where we are today. That was a slide from where we were last week. And here's a slide from where we are today. We, as of sunset tonight, will have completed 6 weeks of these 7 weeks of the Feast of Firstfruits. The Feast of Weeks ends next Sabbath at sunset. We'll have completed 7 weeks of first day through seventh day Sabbath weeks. Normal creation weeks from the first day through the seventh day Sabbath. And after that seventh Sabbath, at the end of next Sabbath, when the sun goes down, when we have completed 7 weeks, as we're instructed to do in Leviticus 23:15, telling us that 7 weeks must be complete, and then on the morrow after that seventh Sabbath, where I've got the 7 in purple over there and a little arrow pointing back, you swing back around to the first day of the week. The morrow after the seventh Sabbath, you number as day 50 and bring your meat offering today, which today is a financial offering, and that's the holy day. You have a commanded assembly. no servile work that day, and you celebrate the holy day. And that's just like we have here with the P right next to me, Pentecost. And that is, part of my 8 got cut off just a little bit in that slide. But let me see if I can bring that out full screen and you can see all of it. Maybe, yeah, it's still cut off. I cut a little tight. The 8's over there on the far left side to the left of the P being the first initial of Pentecost, because that's actually the 8th week. We're outside the 7 weeks that are to be complete. We're on the first day of the 8th week. That's day number 50 when we get to Pentecost. Now, if we go straight up the slide here and look where I've got the W up here, and there's an arrow next to it, it's the morrow after the Sabbath that occurs either on Passover or during the days of unleavened bread. Or an easier way to say that would be that's the weekly Sabbath that occurs during the Passover week, because generically the Passover has right adjacent to it the week of the days of unleavened bread. And so for purposes of determining the weekly Sabbath, we could say the Passover week, because that weekly Sabbath is in the week in which, or on which, during which Passover occurs, even if that weekly Sabbath is the Passover itself, even if Passover occurs on the Sabbath, which it can do. The days, and I was kind of I cut off the top of my slide in this photograph. But the weekly Sabbath runs, or the Feast of Weeks runs first day through 7th day. You know, at creation, God created the week with 7 days in it, the first day through the 7th day. And when it comes to Passover and God's calendar, Passover can only occur on one of any 4 days, certain 4 days of the week. It cannot occur, as you can see the line below the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see I've got the 1, 3, and 5 pulled down a little bit. The way God has fixed it, and there are reasons for that related to the other holy days, so that we don't have Passover butting up against or occurring following a weekly Sabbath. In other words, Passover cannot occur on Sunday because we have to do preparation for Passover, and we don't want to be doing that preparation on a weekly Sabbath day, on a regular Sabbath. So God has fixed the calendar so that Passover cannot occur on the first day of the week. So it's not the day after a weekly Sabbath. But it can be on a weekly Sabbath, because we can prepare for the Passover as we prepare for the weekly Sabbath on the 6th day of the week, on a Friday. Taking away the days that Passover cannot be on, the 1st, 3rd, or 5th, on Sunday, Tuesday, or Thursday, that leaves the 4 days that Passover can occur on, but only on one of them in any given year. Passover is just once a year, so it can occur on the 4 days it can occur on. It can occur once on one of these 4 days in a given year, and those 4 days would be either a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sabbath day itself. And when it is the Sabbath day, that Sabbath day is the determining Sabbath, the target Sabbath, you could say, that's numbered as 0, from which the next day is the wave sheaf day that begins the 50-day count to Pentecost. All right, now, where are we right now today? I've gone over that a lot, so if you really need to get that, go back to our Bible study last night. I covered it in a little more detail, even though I didn't have this slide with all the magnetic numbers on it that I've got attached to my refrigerator door. But if you go down to the 6th week, all right, at the top I've got the days of the week. There's 1 through 7. And of those days of the week, Passover cannot occur on 1, 3, or 5, on Sunday, Tuesday, or Thursday. The 0 under the Sabbath means that weekly Sabbath of the week in which Passover occurs. Now, if Passover occurs on a Sabbath, that's the end of a weekly Sabbath, but you've already got your determination for when the weekly Sabbath that triggers Wave Sheaf Day figured out, and the next day that starts a new calendar week begins with the wave sheaf. And there are 7 of those weeks that are first day through 7th day that we are to count as being complete, that we observe as the Feast of Weeks. And then the morrow after that 7th Sabbath, we number as 50 for Pentecost. And we've just got 1 week left to go after sunset tonight. After sunset tonight, 6 weeks will have been complete. 6 times 7, as you can see on the far right after the 6, where I've got the ruler marking this particular week. 42 days will have been complete at sunset tonight of the count toward 50 for Pentecost. And now the 27 means that's today's date on the Hebrew calendar. It's the 27th day of the 2nd month. Now, this week was kind of an important week in the Feast of Weeks. Of the 50 days that we are looking at, that on the 50th day becomes Pentecost, the 40th day represents the day on which Jesus Christ said a so long, toodaloo, see you in the resurrection, to the disciples, to his apostles of the Ephesian era. You know, for after his death and resurrection, he actually came back and spent time with them, you know, where they could see him in person, for 40 days. And then on that 40th day, he ascended into the heavens and told the fellows, after I go, greater works, when I'm up there and not coming back down here to see you, greater works than I did, you will do, because I'll be at my Father's side. That occurred this week on day 5 of this week, which that would be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That occurred Thursday of this week, day 5. That was just a couple of days ago. That was the day excuse me, in the Ephesian era, back in 31 AD, that Christ said so long. He ascended to the heavens, and as humans, we didn't see him anymore, and won't until his return, his second coming. All right, but at sunset tonight, we begin the 7th week of the Feast of Weeks, and at the end of next Sabbath at sunset, it becomes Pentecost. So Pentecost is just a week and a day away. It's next, not tomorrow, but it's a week from tomorrow, next Sunday week, tomorrow week, June 5 is Pentecost. All right, so I don't want anybody saying I didn't tell you. And as a cross-check, you know, this year Passover occurred on a Friday, on the 6th day of the week. So tracing the 6 at the top of the screen is kind of cut off at the top, but you can tell 6 is after the 5. Go straight down the column that's got the 6 in it, and you'll see a 6 down here just below the freezer door. You see a 3 for the 3rd month on God's holy sacred calendar, the 6 for the 6th day of the 3rd month. That's just a cross-check for being able to check to see if we counted Pentecost correctly, because in a year when Passover occurs on the 6th day of the week on a Friday, Pentecost always counts out in those years. When Pentecost is on a Friday, Pentecost counts out to be the 6th day of the 3rd week. That also happens to make it be the same day the Jewish people always keep it, because they count from the annual Sabbath, and when Passover is on a Friday, then the wave sheaf day for them is the weekly Sabbath, and the morrow after that they begin the count as we do on the first day of the week. So, which they always do it that way, by counting from the annual Sabbath, which means, in other words, this year the annual Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath are the same day of the week, as it was back in, what was that, April this year. Okay, but that 6th day of the 3rd month counts out to be a week from tomorrow, June 5, on your Roman calendar. All right, I hope that's helpful. And then On my television, on my refrigerator door, I've got a 10 and a 4, because I'm going to go back at some point and do a little talk for some potential new people who are starting to tune in and explain a difference between God's church and a lot of the churches of the world. Now, if you've been grown up in a church of this world, whether it be Protestant or Catholic or even something else, some non-denominational religions, many of them teach you that you're keeping the 10 Commandments. Now, I know in the modern day world, many have turned to saying you don't have to keep them. But there are people in your congregation and even some ministers. As I grew up, the minister were saying, and the teachers and what they call the Sunday school classes would teach you that we are keeping the 10 Commandments. But then the preacher would stand up behind that lectern on a pulpit and tell everybody that we don't play cards on Sunday, we don't go movies to Sunday, we hold our worship service on Sunday, as if we were keeping the Sabbath. But then when I started writing in to Mr. Armstrong for information, and my dad would see it come in the mail, my dad learned before I did that somehow that Mr. Armstrong was affiliated with a Sabbath-keeping church. I was looking for where God's church was and to try to understand why there's a different church on every corner and why they all preach something a little different. And God, please show me where your Matthew 16:18 true church that Jesus Christ said he would build, show me where it is. And today Mr. Armstrong is going to talk about how truth is revealed. God has to open your mind to it, because otherwise humans have blinders on them. A couple of fellows in New York one of the fellows in New York was asking me about this just yesterday even. And so what Mr. Armstrong will be speaking about today, Dale's going to answer your question very specifically. How truth is revealed. God has to remove those blinders. Before God let me know where to find and hear truth, he let me go through 3 weeks of plowing through my Bible myself, trying to figure out where is your church. And I couldn't find his church. All I found was churches that were doing things different than what I found in the Bible. And after I prayed for 3 weeks, staying up all night, many nights praying, God, show me, where is your church? He answered my prayer. He revealed it to me by answering my prayer, with causing me to hear a World Tomorrow radio broadcast with Mr. Herbert Armstrong, starting off with the very questions I was asking in my prayers for 3 weeks. Why a church on every corner? And just what are we doing here? And a few things like that. And Mr. Armstrong opened that night's program with the very same questions I had that I had been praying the past 3 weeks. So I think God worked it out that way. The first radio broadcast I heard was the answer to the prayer I was pounding away at God's throne. So, God may have already had it in mind to draw and call. Yours truly, I came up with a very meager background. I was the cream of the crud on the earth. As many in the church have sometimes put it, God calls the weak of the world. So we've been referred to by some as the cream of the crud, but we're not to stay the crud. We're to change and grow and mature and become able to teach others, even those that were naturally superior to us, like your all-American guys, some of whom came through Ambassador College, even went out because they were so charming and just naturally eloquent speakers. They went out into the field ministry, but did they last? Well, we're hearing from some of them now as they appear on these Zoom-type programs people put together, and they're explaining how they preached it for more than 20 years and didn't even believe what they were teaching. But they got a paycheck, so they taught it until their paycheck was cut off, and then they open up and say, I never believed that, and I don't believe this other stuff you guys are doing either. I'm mad at you for cutting off my paycheck, and now I'm going to really spill the beans about myself. But many of those people, brethren, I wouldn't be condemning or over harsh on them, because many of them will or may have an opportunity. You know, it's God's purpose that none perish. And a lot of these people, even though God was able to allow them to be there helping other people because they had natural ability and the harvest is plenty, the workers are few, they were able to be there because God could use a rock. But even though they could preach it, didn't understand it, they helped others. And at some point, God will remove the blinders, like at some point in the second resurrection, and they'll have an opportunity, just as we've had and are having, to obey God and then be born into God's kingdom. All right, but you have to be careful. We do have to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And if you're doing something you know you shouldn't be doing, you may want to do some fasting. You may want to do a lot of prayer and asking God to help you overcome that and to provide a fix for you that will help you overcome it. And the right fix for you, that is important. And to be sure to get the obstacles out of the way that might be a stumbling block to you. You know, even if that's at a cost to you physically, because you don't want to hurt the stumbling block either. You don't want to hurt yourself. And all right, brother, let's we're going to go on after we sing one more hymn. We're going to go on early to Mr. Armstrong today, but we're going to sing one to make us ready for Feast of Trumpets next week. This is one of the hymns you would sing on a holy day, and it's from Psalm 15. Who shall dwell on thy holy hill? Let's all sing this together. And this does have chorale accompaniment with it. Let's all sing together. Psalm 15. Everybody together on verse 1. Brother, thank you again for those who sang along. And because we have a holy day coming up in 1 week, let's sing one more that I have in my slide bank here. I also have a few slides. I probably need to move out there because I got some slides of some of my friends from Facebook. And let's sing together from Psalm 9, I will praise thee, O Eternal. Verse 1.
Eternal judges rightly and forever he
Thank you again. We're having a song fest this morning in preparation for a week from tomorrow being an annual holy day of the holy day of Pentecost that we've had to count to. We have to make sure 7 Sabbaths, 7 weeks of Monday through Sabbath weeks are complete. And after that 7th week, at the end of that Sabbath of that 7th week, the morrow after that Sabbath, we number as number 50, and that's what we're doing. As of next Sabbath, at the end of next Sabbath, 49 days, 7 weeks of first day of the week through 7th day of the week will have been complete. And then we will be observing as of next Saturday night through all day Sunday, well, not all day, until sunset on Sunday, we will be observing the day of Pentecost, as we have counted off on my refrigerator door here a few times. Okay, let's go to where I have Mr. Armstrong ready to sing to us. I have to talk to us from a sermon excerpt that he gave that was aired in 1979. And it's about that subject, fellows, as I mentioned, were asking me about yesterday, related also to the subject last night, which was Truth, the Greatest Quest. And Mr. Armstrong is following up from where we were with that last night, explaining today how truth is revealed. Let's listen, brethren, carefully, prayerfully, reverently, because today is a day which God has set us sanctified and made holy, on which he appears with us more closely, and on which he asks us to remember him as our creator and how he created the Sabbath by resting on the 7th day during the week of creation, and that the weekly cycle has not been interrupted since the creation week, and that includes even Joshua's long day. Yes, that was longer than 24 hours. The sun was up more than approximately 12 hours that day. And God fixed the time through the entire universe, all the planets and galaxies and suns and moons and stars that rotate in a certain given order and that produce an immaculate time clock, better than any Timex you ever could imagine, with all their wheels and gears inside to make it keep very accurate time when everything used to be very mechanically done, even with a wind-up spring. No batteries, no electronics. God keeps all that vast universe with all of its galaxies and all the things in the galaxies that we were just mentioning. He keeps all of that in order. And on Joshua's long day, he had to make everything rotate and spin longer and still stay in sync with the overall plan, and then bring it back into its normal time frame of approximately 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of night, give or take, as the seasons change those things a little bit. But now, if somebody had been running an electronic clock at that time, your electronic clocks would have been really thrown out of whack. And, even the Naval Observatory that fixes the time for the United States, they check it against the universe. So God's very involved with all that. And the weekly cycle did not change, even including Joshua's long day, because God doesn't do it by an electronic clock. He does it by the clock he's got up there. But now if you run an electronic clock, it's going to run pretty much in precision with what God normally has going on, except Joshua's long day. That was just a longer day, but it was only one day. It did not disrupt or change the weekly cycle in God's scheme of things. He kept the weekly cycle to be the first day through the 7th day without flipping it around or having to take any days in a crazy way like the Gregorian calendar does off the calendar system. All right, so what was I saying? Today's subject by God's end-time apostle is how truth is revealed.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents The World Tomorrow with Herbert W. Armstrong. Ladies and gentlemen, Herbert W. Armstrong.
How does God put the doctrines, the teachings that we are to believe and that we are to preach into the church? He naturally does it through Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is the head of the church. So here is a basic teaching of the doctrine in 1 Corinthians, the first chapter, and in verse 10, where the Apostle Paul to the church at Corinth said, "Now I beseech you, brethren, in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing." He doesn't want John speaking one thing and Henry something else and Paul something else and then somebody else something else. We are commanded to all speak the same thing. Now that thing must come from God and not from the desires of men. You agree with that? Or do some of you think it should be the desires of men contrary to God? The Corinthian church was not in harmony. Notice a little further here, the very next verse. "For it has been declared unto me of you, my brethren, by them which are of the house of Chloe, that there are contentions among you." Now, God doesn't want these contentions. He doesn't want these differences of one saying, "Well, I don't like that doctrine, and I want to get this watered down. I want that changed." "Now this I say, that every one of you saith," and this seemed to be all of them, "I am of Paul, or I of Apollos, and I of Cephas, and I of Christ." So that was the trouble in the church at Corinth. Now, if everybody teaches what he believes and the way he sees it, we'll have nothing but terrible confusion in the church. Our teachings and doctrines must come from God. And how does that happen? Well, God shows it to Christ, and then Christ puts it in the church, and I'm going to show you how. Now, God has always worked through one man. And in Acts 7, verse 38, "This is he that was in the church in the wilderness," back in the days of Moses. The children of Israel are called the church that was in the wilderness. Now, in Old Testament language, they are called the congregation of Israel, but congregation and church mean the same thing. They're just two different English words that have the same meaning exactly. Now the question is, how did God put truth in the church of the Old Testament? Let's go clear back there. He called Moses especially. Moses didn't seek God, but God had this burning bush there in that little incident, and he talked to Moses. Now some in Israel began to challenge Moses and his leadership, back here in Numbers 12. And Miriam, who was the sister of Moses, and Aaron, his brother, spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. They didn't like that. Well, now, you see, they said that they had to take it in their hands to correct him. Well, God was the one to correct him if he had done wrong. And God had not corrected him for this, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, "Hath the Eternal indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us?" And the Lord heard it. And he said, "Hear now my words. Wherefore then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" God said we ought to be afraid to speak against his anointed and the one that he has chosen and called and put in to lead his work. Now that was in the church of the Old Testament. Now next we'll come to Numbers 16. Now Korah and Dathan and Abiram and On, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with certain children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly. Now these were people in high positions under Moses. Moses had appointed them as God had directed him. Famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Eternal is among them. Whereof then lift you up yourselves above the congregation. They denied that God had put them in their place. We come over to verse 25. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. And Moses said, Hereby shall ye know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have done none of them of my own mind. Yet they said that he had made a leader himself. Then the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up and their houses and all the men that appertained to Korah and all their goods. And the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. Now I've shown you that he dealt with one man, and I'm telling you that he has always dealt with one man at a time. Now look at the New Testament. Jesus chose 12 disciples, didn't he? And you will say they were all equal. Or will you? And they were to be taught. A disciple is a student, a learner, one being taught or one learning. So while they were disciples, they were really in school learning, and later they graduated, shall we say, and they became apostles. Now, many have not realized that God has always dealt with people through one man. Now, let's come to a little of that. A few things that I think we've read over and over and over and have not stopped to realize and put together. So we'll turn now to the 4th chapter of Matthew and verses 18 and 19. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. Now this is the first account of Jesus choosing a disciple, and the first one named was Simon Peter. Notice he was named first. So Jesus said to them, Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Now then, we come a little farther into Matthew 10 and verse 2. Of course, you all know that that is where it mentions the apostles and their names. Now, the names of the 12 apostles are these. The first. Who was the first? Who is number one? The first, Simon, who is called Peter. And then he went on and named the others. But I want to show you that Peter was always first in a way that I think we've read over and never quite grasped it and never quite realized it before. Now let's see, Matthew 16. When Jesus came into the coasts of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And Simon Peter is the one who spoke up. He was the leader, answered and said, Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now let's read on. And Jesus answered and said unto him, now not to the other disciples. He's talking right now to Simon Peter. Jesus said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, that is the son of Jonah. For flesh and blood has not revealed it unto you, no human being or man, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee, who's he speaking to? Unto thee, Peter. Have you ever noticed that? I say unto thee, Peter, that thou art Peter, You see, he isn't saying this to the other apostles. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock. Now, Peter means Petra, and it means a small stone, but the rock means Christ. I will build my church. Yes, because the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ, the chief cornerstone. I will build my church, and the gates of hell, which means the grave here, shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee. Now, who's he talking to? Thou, Peter. He doesn't say to all of you, the others, in this place, I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou, Peter, shalt bind on the earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now then, in another place, Jesus was talking to all 12 and said that what you bind will be bound in heaven, and what you loose will be loosed in heaven. But here, he specifically said that to Peter. Now, in a sense, that applies to an apostle anywhere at any time. And I realize that that can apply to me today.
Herbert W. Armstrong will return right after this message.
Oh, in Matthew 18, verse 15, this is one of the places, there's a place in Luke, I'm sure, too, where it speaks to all of the 12. In Matthew 18, the same time came the disciples to Jesus, saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom? Now, there is a conversation between the disciples, that would mean the 12, and Jesus. And then in verse 18, verily I say unto you, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Now there he said it to the whole 12. But at least it is apostles and not the church as a whole. Now then, next, let us come to John 21 and verse 15. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? Now, he spoke to Peter and about Peter more than any of the others. Peter was unquestionably the leader of the apostles. So Peter saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. And Jesus said to him, Then feed my lambs. Then again, he saith to him again, the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Why, yes, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. And he said unto him, Feed my sheep. Now that to feeding his sheep was given to Peter to be the head over the feeding of the flock, and not to the 12, actually. Of course, I presume that to some extent it meant the 12 too. But this literally is speaking of Peter and not the others. It's putting Peter first. Now let's go on into the book of Acts. I just wanted to show you that even through the time of their training as disciples, Peter is mentioned first in many ways. Next, let us come to Acts 3. Now Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer. And a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, and asked alms of them. Now, whom seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked alms. He was a beggar. And here again is Peter, not John. And Peter, looking into his eyes upon him with John, said, but it's Peter who said it, Look on us. And the cripple gave heed unto them, expecting to receive some money or something. Then it was Peter who said, Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And the mighty miracle happened. So that was the voice of Peter. Now coming to verse 11, as the lame man which was healed held Peter and John, all the people ran together unto them in the porch that is called Solomon's, right at the temple. And, verse 12, When Peter saw it, he answered unto the people, Ye men of Israel, why marvel you this? This great speech, and this converted another 2,000 people, and it was Peter, not the other apostles. We just come right on to the next chapter now, in Acts 4 and verse 8. Then Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said unto them, You rulers of the people and elders of Israel, if we in this day be examined of the good deed that we have done to the impotent man, that is healing that cripple, by what means he is made whole, be it known unto you and to all of the people of Israel, that by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, whom God raised up from the dead, even by him doth this man stand before you whole. This is the stone that was set at naught by you builders, which has become the head of the corner, or the chief cornerstone of the foundation of the church. Now when, in verse 13, they saw the boldness of Peter and John, but Peter was the spokesman. Peter is the one who takes the lead every time. Now by the hands of the apostles, in this case it means all of them, were many signs and wonders wrought among the people, insomuch that they brought forth the sick into the streets, and laid them on beds and couches, that at the least the shadow of Peter, it doesn't mention the other apostles, the shadow of Peter passing by might overshadow some of them so that they would be healed. Turn to the 9th chapter in verse 32. And it came to pass, as Peter passed throughout all the quarters, he came down also to the saints which dwelt in Lydda. And there he found a certain man named Aeneas, which had kept his bed 8 years, and was sick of the palsy. And Peter said unto him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ maketh thee whole. Arise, and take up your bed. And he arose immediately. And all that dwelt there were amazed by what they had seen. Now the 38th verse. And forasmuch as Lydda was nigh to Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent unto him 2 men, desiring him that he would not delay to come to them. Then Peter arose and went with them. Peter put them all forth, and kneeled down, and prayed, and turning him to the body, said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand, and lifted her up, and when he had called the saints and widows, presented her alive. I had never until recently put all of these scriptures together, and when you get them all, it's just Peter, 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 all the way along.
Herbert W. Armstrong will return right after this message.
Now I want you to pay particular attention at this time on this famous 15th chapter of Acts. It starts with the fact that some of them were up in Antioch, and certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, Except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. When therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them. Now here comes a disputation about doctrine. They determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and the elders about this question. And now the apostles and the elders came together to consider that matter. Now at first the whole church welcomed them, but now they're having a meeting to settle this matter. And when there had been much disputing, a great controversy, they had nothing but controversy. One man thought that it should be this way and another the other. It was Peter then who stood up. Now notice who settled it. Peter stood up and said unto them, Men and brethren, you know how that a good while ago God made choice among us that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. Now therefore, why tempt you God, and put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But we believe that through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ we shall be saved even as they. Then all the multitude kept silence. Peter had settled it. The others were arguing and disputing. Peter rose up and settled it. Now notice the next verse. All the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul. What did they do? Barnabas and Paul declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles with them. They merely gave them a report of what had been happening before they came there. The matter of this from up at Antioch was now settled. As soon as Peter settled it, James answered, saying, now James was the pastor of the local church at that time, the church at Jerusalem, which really was then the headquarters church, and that's why they went up there. And naturally, he's what today we would call the chairman of the meeting. Someone had to lead it out, and this was merely an official duty, but Peter is the one who set the doctrine. Now then, James answered and said, men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon, or Simon, meaning Peter, had declared how that God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. In other words, Peter had settled it. And to this agree the words of the prophets as it is written, and then he quotes quite a little from the Old Testament. And finally in verse 19, whereby my sentence is. And he just simply makes official what Peter had settled and had made true. My sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to God, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, from fornication, from things strangled, and from blood. Because Moses of old time hath in every city, now this means even among Gentiles, them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. In other words, many Gentiles were coming into these meetings on the Sabbath. Then it pleased the apostles and the elders, and the whole church, to send chosen men of their own company to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. Well, that settled the matter. That really covers that. But Peter is the one who made the decision. Now, if you read it carefully, you can't get any other meaning out of it. Now, come to Galatians, the 2nd chapter. Paul was just speaking how about 14 years after he went up to Jerusalem, and Barnabas took Titus with him, and he went up by revelation and communicated unto them the gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, which he had gotten, of course, directly from Christ. But contrariwise, in verse 7, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision, in other words, to the Gentiles, was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. That shows that Peter was the head of all of the apostles, and at least first of all, he was the head over all of it. And now that Paul was made the head over the Gentiles, Peter had later then gone on to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which were in Western Europe and in England. Now then, we come to Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. Now therefore you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens. Now these were Gentiles in Ephesus, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. That's family language, a household. In the family of God. And are built upon, as the church, the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. Now, I wonder if you have gone through the New Testament to see what prophets were in the New Testament and what did they do. There is not a single prophet in the New Testament that had input into the doctrine. But the Old Testament prophets did. And most of the prophets of the Old Testament were writing things that were never given to ancient Israel at all. Actually, when most of the prophets wrote, it was after both Israel and Judah had been sent into slavery. There was no way that these things could get to them. The book of Ezekiel, for example, he was among the people of Judah He was at the river Kibar, and his message was, go to the house of Israel. And there was no way he could go to the house of Israel. He merely wrote the book, and the message was for someone in our day to go to the house of Israel, who knows that the house of Israel is here in the United States and in England and in Western Europe. Now, really, what I'm saying is that all of the doctrine, all of what we believe, of what the church believed 1900 years ago, was put into the church by the apostles. They got some of it from the prophets, but it was put in by the apostles. That's why the church is on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, and Christ, the chief cornerstone. And it comes from, now Christ had taught them directly, but Jesus Christ is the Word of God in person. And Christ's apostle today got the same truth from the Word of God in print. And this says the same thing exactly that Christ said in person.
All right, a big thank you to the great God who has preserved the speaking, many speaking occasions, radio broadcast, telecast, Bible stories, Bible studies, and sermons of his end-time apostle Herbert W. Armstrong, so that we could have those today and be encouraged to grow in Christ. All right, again, let's go back for a moment and take just a brief look at where we are with relation to God's calendar for meat and due season, where we are in a certain time order. Now, this was the calendar of the picture I took from last week. You can see the top clearly. I've got it designed a little different for a purpose of pointing out that last week, if you want to review this, there are at least 4 different sevens. Now, there's a lot of duality in the Bible, but sometimes there's double duality, or in this case, there's at least 4 sevens. Perhaps you can even think of more. From the creation at the very beginning, when God was restoring the earth back to some decency and order and creating man and the animals, some of which may not have existed before the flood, because we see evidence of great big animals that God did not choose to restore to the earth after Satan's rebellion and Satan's worldwide flood. But God straightened it out in a week of recreation, and then that week of 7 days in a week. That's when a week was determined to be 7 days, as God explains it to us in Genesis. There's the first day of the week through the 7th, and on the 7th day God rested and made the 7th day in a very special way to be sanctified, set apart as a peculiar, special day to reverence God. And that word reverence should be much in our mind on the Sabbath, and not doing our own pleasures that day, doing what we do with great reverence to God and with appropriate fellowship. And as we're scattered, to keep that fellowship with understanding that we are scattered, we are under a punishment, we are under a test, a time of trial and testing. There was another 7 that God created back during the time of ancient Israel with the Feast of Firstfruits. Now, even though that firstfruits in a spiritual way would not start until after Christ came, during the time when he was building the New Testament church, there was a former type of that with ancient Israel with the Feast of Firstfruits as they came into the Promised Land. They did a wave sheaf offering, and they did that on the first day of the week after a weekly Sabbath that was part of the Passover week. It was either Passover or part of the Passover week. Because if Passover is not the Sabbath, then it's Friday, then the Passover week begins on Friday. If it's on a Wednesday, then the Passover week begins on Wednesday. If it's on a Monday, Passover week begins on Monday. And the end of that week weekly Sabbath in the week that Passover starts. If it starts on a Friday, the very next day is the weekly Sabbath that determines it. If Passover itself is a weekly Sabbath, that is the weekly Sabbath that determines when the wave sheaf day is on the first day of the next week, on the day after the weekly Sabbath. You know, always first day of the week, a wave sheaf. And that wave sheaf begins the first day of 7 weeks of first day through seventh day weeks that must be complete. And then on the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, we number as 50, bring the holy day offering, have a commanded assembly, do no servile work that day. It is a holy day, the holy day of Pentecost, after 7 weeks of the Feast of Weeks. And that's our point here. The Feast of Weeks is another 7. It's 7 weeks, 7 complete weeks that must be complete before you conduct Pentecost on day 50. So day 50 is outside those 7 weeks that have to be complete, not part of it. So you don't keep a holy day on day 51 so that you can throw 50 into the batch of days that must be complete. That's not the way God says do it. He clearly says in Leviticus 23:15 that 7 Sabbaths of first day through seventh day weeks must be complete. And when those 7 weeks are complete, then the morrow after that 7th week, you number as number 50. You can go back to my slide that I took this morning real quickly, where I've got after the 7th Sabbath, I've got the arrow pointing, swing back around to the first day of the week, and that's when Pentecost is. In fact, a week from tomorrow, because this is the 6th week we're into right now. At the end of today, we will have completed 6 weeks. By end of the day, I mean end of the Sabbath at sundown, we'll have completed 6 of the 7 weeks we're counting toward Pentecost. 42 days of the count will be complete tonight at sunset. Because at the end of 6 weeks of first day through seventh day weeks, that's a simple 6 times 7, means 42 days are complete. You can count them out each day if you want to, and you'll see, wow. When you get to the end of today, it will have been 42 days. When we get to the end of next Sabbath, then the morrow after that will be day 50, Pentecost. Boom. And both the wave sheaf day and Pentecost are on the first day of the week. They're in that first column, and that's why I've got the 111 there, meaning that's the first day of the week. If you could see it closer, I have a little no-no sign on the Monday after Pentecost, just to remind us that we are not counting 50 days to be complete and then keep Pentecost on day 51 as Penta plus 1 cost. No, that's not what God said do. He said 7 Sabbaths of first day through seventh day Sabbath weeks must be complete. And then the morrow after that 7th Sabbath, you number as 50 and do the offering, do the commanded assembly, and do no servile work on that holy day. All right, I think we've covered that pretty well, and you should know that the next holy day, next feast day, next holy day is a week from tomorrow. So be sure you're ready for that. Many of you, if you work a job that's Monday through Friday, you don't have to worry about it. But if you work in a store that's open on Sundays somewhere, and they have scheduled you to work next week, you've got some quick talking to do to go to your boss or supervisor and explain to them that, oh, hey, I forgot to give you my my little card with the holy days on it, and I need to be off next Sunday, a week from tomorrow, because it is a no servile work day. All right, brother, just so you got meat and due season, you got reminders of what you need to be living godly and not let things slip up on you like it has some where they said, oh, man, I didn't know yesterday was a holy day. I missed it. All right, we're telling you here it's a week from tomorrow, June 5, on your Roman calendar. All right, brethren, with that coming up and with having given a Bible study last night, and I was up very late, I'm going to close us off early today. And if you missed that Bible study, or even if you got it, I think you should want to go back and hear that one again. God's End Time Apostle Herbert Armstrong speaks on truth just like he did today, entitling that sermon segment from last night, The Greatest Quest. Truth, the great quest, or the greatest quest. And today you saw Mr. Armstrong explaining how truth is revealed. And he has to take the blinders off, John 6:44. Because ever since Adam and Eve ate of that forbidden fruit and were thrown out of the Garden of Eden, two angels with flaming swords placed at the entranceway to the Garden of Eden so that Adam and Eve, or any of mankind, could not go back in there, not until after Christ returns, with those few exceptions that he is called to be part of an early spring harvest. And if you are being called to that now, I hope you'll be encouraged to tune in each Sabbath, Friday night sunset to Saturday sunset. Tune in for our Bible studies Friday night at 7:30 p.m. and our Sabbath services on Sabbath morning, a.m. to the U.S., p.m. to the U.K. And we put those in an archive that you can find on cogtv.org or on sabbath.tv, as you can see in the lower third from this side. Either place will take you to the same website at cogtv.org. And on that particular website, on the homepage, let me see if I can bring that up here. I think I can flip over to that if I do this carefully. What happened? Did we lose our ability to change the... No, see, that's working. Okay, and that's working. Oh, I see. Somehow the oh, it's there. Okay, that's the page I wanted. All right, that was goofing me off because it's the live stream is on a delay. What I actually want to take you to is the top of the page, so you can see when you get to the home page, you'll see our banner. Church of God Television, not a church group you can join, not a church organization. This is a church ministry, and it's a television ministry. And those of you that want to support it, you certainly may. It's one of the few places that preaches what God taught as truth through his end-time apostle Herbert Armstrong without compromise. That includes the truth about when the Laodicean era begins. And as I mentioned last night, every one of your vanity plate, blankety-blank, banana-peeling Church of God, this or that groups out there, you look on their websites, they are all teaching that we are in the Laodicean era now. That contradicts the truth as God gave it through his end-time apostle. You heard today how truth is revealed through the apostles, and it was primarily in the early Ephesian era, it was through the apostle Peter. That era has come and gone. We're now in the Philadelphia era. The Philadelphia era continues all the way up until the time Jesus Christ returns, like I was saying last night. You know, there are two candlesticks during the Great Tribulation. That second candlestick that represents the Laodicean era does not come along until the Great Tribulation begins. That second candlestick is one of the two witnesses. The other candlestick, either a resurrected Herbert Armstrong or someone else who God will bring along at the right time. He's not here now. He's not announced now as one of God's two end-time witnesses, because that job, as a job entitled as the two olive branches, the two candlesticks representing the last two candlesticks, the two olive branches, the two witnesses of Revelation 11. Revelation 11 very clearly tells us their job lasts for 1,260 days. In fact, I tell you what, let's do. Right after I just make the mention that you can find last night's Bible study by going to our home page. This is why I brought you here. And if you go over to the, let's see if I can scoot this over just a little bit. Well, let me do it. It's kind of sticking itself on the, well, yeah, there it is. I can get it. We can bring it up. On the right margin, you can't see all of the buttons, but you can see enough to see that there's a button not very far from the top. You just scroll down just 1, 2 buttons. The second one down is called Archive Videos. And if you hit that button, now you can watch last night's Bible study from the home page by just scrolling down to where it says most recent or more recent Sabbath Eve Bible study. This video plays on demand. You can just hit the button on the home page and play it. But now I've noticed in certain browsers that after a half hour or 45 minutes, the video will cut off. But it's there for you to make it easy, but you can tap it from there and go on into, this one is playing from YouTube, or you can just go ahead and play it from the beginning where it's not going to cut off from you by going to the archive video page, by pressing that menu button over there on the far right side. Says, you can see most of the words, says archive, says videos underneath it. If you press that button, I'm going to reach over to a screen that's in front of me and press that button. It turns gray while you're pressing it, and even after you press it, and then it goes to a page, or it's supposed to go to a page. Let me hit it again. There it goes. It goes to a page that shows you the video archive, like it says up here in the banner at the top, video archive. And if you go over to the left side where there's a purple button, like this button you see here that says See Sabbath Video, at this moment, that purple button will be playing last night's Bible study. But within about an hour after we sign off today, that purple button will become this live stream that you're seeing now. It'll become the Sabbath service, because that button is designed to be the latest video live stream. Okay, and then below that you can select the video of your choice by going down to where there's an index that's a written index, and you'll see that at the top of that index, at this moment, it's listing last night's Friday night Sabbath Eve Bible study, starting with the date from last night. This year, 2022. Last night's date was May 27. In about an hour from now, we'll have and the wording up there that'll say May 28 with today's Sabbath service. But this is where you can find the Bible study from last night. If you press on those words, I'm going to do that now. It'll take you over to, it'll activate the link that takes you over to where that video comes up, and you have to press the play button, but that takes you to YouTube, right where that video is stored. And if you press the play button from YouTube, it should play continuously, depending on what happens on your personal computer, from start to finish. And you'll be able to see last night's 90-minute Bible study in its entirety, which I encourage you to do, because we covered some things in a little bit of detail that, we're to grow in grace and knowledge, brethren, and by going there, you'll be able to do that. Now, I didn't have this slide, so I'm talking about some of these things in the Bible study last night. You might want to try to take a mental picture, freeze frame this picture in your mind to realize that of the 7 days of the week, only 4 of those days, on one of 4 days of the week, Passover can occur. On 3 days of the week, Passover cannot occur. It cannot occur on a Sunday, because then it would be following a weekly Sabbath. And the preparation for Passover, you got to pour fresh wine, put out fresh unleavened bread. You wouldn't want to be doing that 2 days before Passover, and you wouldn't want to be doing it on the Sabbath day. So God designed it so Passover cannot fall on a Sunday. By doing that, it also means it can't fall on a Wednesday, and it can't fall on a Sunday, Monday. I can't fall on a Tuesday, and it can't fall on a Thursday. Passover cannot fall on a Sunday, Tuesday, or Thursday. Okay, that's day 1, day 3, day 5. We have to go back and forth between the Hebrew calendar and the Roman calendar while we currently live in a world that's, even though the Roman Empire is in the abyss at the moment, we have to live in a world that still has the impact of what the Roman Empire did when it was active. And it was active as the Holy Roman Empire, where a religious leader picks your emperor and crowns him in a coronation ceremony. And that Holy Roman Empire was active, as Revelation 17, verse 8 talks about it, the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now, why strange language in Revelation 17 like that? Well, we kind of covered that a little bit last night, but it's because that beast was, even though it's not active now, it's not dead. It's just wounded. It's in, as Mrs. Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, noted in March of 2019, you people better look into the abyss. I'm going to make you stare into the abyss. Because she realizes there is a powerful beast in there being healed, being made ready to be revived. And somehow in their blood, they know it. And in their minds, they know it. And they know that thing is coming up out of there again. Some of them do, especially the daughter of an East German evangelical preacher all her childhood years in East Germany. That's former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. God used her to make a profound announcement. You people better look into the abyss. Now, abyss is the original Greek word in Revelation 17 that the King James Version renders as the bottomless pit. So when you look at that word in the King James, it's going to be saying bottomless pit, but that's from the original Greek abyss. And now, see, did I mention I was going to put a scripture up there? I was up too late last night indexing the Bible study for you, but I hope you'll go check the Bible study out. We cover a lot of things there for you. And if you can picture this chart. Oh, I was going through the 4 different sevens that I wanted to mention. There are 7 days in the week. There are 7 weeks in the Feast of Firstfruits. There are 7 seals from the book of Revelation. And there are 7 church eras. Now, last week I rearranged this 1 through 7 at the top so that we could relate to those seals. Because of the 7 seals in the book of Revelation, only the first 4 are active. And the next major event in prophecy will be the commencement of seal number 5 that we know that Jesus Christ opened to our understanding through Herbert Armstrong to be the Great Tribulation, followed by the heavenly signs that reveal to us there's 1 year left to go of the 3.5 years of Great Tribulation. And during that last year, God is going to step in and pour out his year-long day of wrath, the day of the Lord, and added to the wrath of man and Satan. So that last year is going to be a humdinger, including the first 4 trumpets, which are 4 winds that do a lot of destruction on the earth, and the last 3 trumpets that do a tremendous destruction in the form of 3 great woes. And that third woe being the great and terrible third woe that's poured out from 7 vials after Jesus Christ returns. All right, brethren, that's just wetting your whistle a little bit, and there are 7 church eras. We're now in the 6th era. The 7th era does not commence until the 5th seal commences, till the 5th seal begins. Then that era of martyrdom begins. That 7th church era is an era of martyrdom. Its leader will be one of the 2 witnesses. As one of the candlesticks of the 7 candlesticks, there are 2 candlesticks at the end. 2 witnesses. They are referred to as 2 candlesticks. Now, that's what I was going to put on this screen for you. And let's do that before we close up. I want to put Revelation 11 up here. So let me go over to the Bible display over on the other side of the room here and punch up the book of Revelation. We're going to punch up chapter 11. Once I get Revelation open. Okay, chapter 11, and we'll just start with the first verse but we'll punch it up to get down to the rest of the verses. Okay, let me come back with you, and we're going to switch over to the Bible display that I just punched up Revelation 11 on. And let's move forward just a little bit in Revelation to where it starts mentioning in verse 3 how God will give power unto his 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy. We're told right here exactly how long. It is the same amount of time that the Great Tribulation lasts or runs. 1,260 days. That's 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. 1,260 days divided by the prophetic month of 30 days in a prophetic month, gives you 42 months. Divided by 12 gives you 3.5 years. That's the same length of time that the Great Tribulation runs. It's the same amount of time that those who are protected, those who are counted worthy to escape, who do the prerequisites of Luke 21:36, are in a place of nourishment, protection, safety, final training, in a tri-wilderness place east of the Jordan River. That place is described in your Bible in Daniel 11, verse 40. So the 2 witnesses begin their job during the 1,260 days of the Great Tribulation. There's one of those 2 witnesses is either in the grave right now or will be, as it happened in several church eras. They had more than one person be the candlestick of that era. In fact, sometimes as many as a couple or 3 decades after one man had died, God would raise up another man to be, for example, the candlestick of the Thyatira era. It had 3 different men doing the job of the one candlestick. Not at the same time, not concurrently, and not exactly consecutively, because they didn't hand off to one another. One would die several years or decades later. God would raise up another man to be the candlestick of the Thyatira era, and then he died, and then a couple of decades later, God raised up a third man. Whatever the exact time between their deaths were, I don't have the exact number for you, but it was some length of years between the different men who were the candlestick of the Thyatira era. Now, God has not chosen yet to do that for the Philadelphia era, and he may not, since we are so close. The 4 seals are so full bloom, happening with greater frequency and greater impact and intensity than ever before, to the point that they could be fulfilling the analogy that Christ gave in Matthew 24 of the fig tree, and then other chapters, Luke 13, Mark 21, Mark 13, Luke 21, I should have said, of all the trees, the fig tree and all the trees, saying that when their limbs become tender and the little leaves sprout out, the buds begin to blossom and bloom and become full, you know that summer is near. You know, and summer is here when they become full bloom. He said, likewise, when you see these things happen, when you see those first 4 active seals become more frequent, more intense, full bloom, you know that it is here. What is the it? Some of the parallel chapters tell you the it that is here is the kingdom of God is here. Well, how here can it be before the 5th seal opens? Well, the 5th seal runs 3.5 years, that same time clock as the 3 witnesses are testifying. So the kingdom of God is only as near as 3.5 years. That's as near as you can get it. And that 3.5 years starts to clock out when the 5th seal opens up. Let's see, do I have a closer? All right, so right now, the first 4 of these, of the 7 seals, 6 of them mentioned in Revelation 6. So I've got 6 on the screen at the moment. The first 4, only the first 4 of the 7 are active. The next major event in prophecy that is to occur after these first four become full bloom, when they happen, as Christ put it, then that fifth seal commences with the Great Tribulation. And it's followed by the heavenly signs, which then follow with, well, I'll see, I'm going the wrong way, which then follows with the year-long Day of the Lord as the seventh seal, which consists of 7 trumpets. And that follows the sealing of the 144,000. It follows a half hour of silence in the heavens. Then it begins with 4 winds and concludes with 3 woes, all of which, the 4 winds and 3 woes, equal your 7 trumpets of the 7th seal. I'll cover that in more detail another time. I was encouraging you to go listen to last night's Bible study. So let me sign us on out of here so that you can get there, go over there and do that. Thank you for joining me for this Sabbath service, AM to the U.S., PM to the U.K. We'll look forward to seeing you again next Sabbath here on the Sabbath TV channel, part of cogtv.org. Remember, that's where you can go to find the archive video page that will let you pull up last night's Bible study. Hope you'll do that. I hope you'll join us next Sabbath. Until then, brethren, have a good rest of the Sabbath day today. Shabbat Shalom and happy Sabbath.